all the years ago when I started this program, that was my thought behind it. I wanted to create that sacred space and share that with others. And so for me, being a platform, to see, when I traveled with Billy, all those years ago, we traveled the west coast of BC and Washington State mostly, putting on sweats. We'd be asked by different residents to go up, and Billy was a known healer, and so I was just one of his lackeys at the time.
Right.
Became his rock dog, and so we'd go and do sweats and stuff for healings. And for me, I started calling it blossoming, and seeing people coming out of the sweats, just blossoming into themselves, or finding a piece of themselves that they forgot, or just, anything. But for me, just to be a part of that was, oh my God, it was just so rewarding. And I wanted to try, because I hurt my back in, when was it, 1990. And so I couldn't do the rocks anymore. I couldn't bring the rock, because my back couldn't do it with my back. So I wanted to try and shift what I looked at as my spiritual work into something that I could still do, but still could create that blossoming. And so for me, one of the other things that I liked besides working around the sweat and that was just sitting around a fire and rapping.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, you know what? I think, I just let it incubate for a bit, and it came up with the idea of doing a spiritually based show where we're like sitting in one of our living rooms drinking tea and just rapping and just sharing, because I believe that there's something to radio waves that we don't truly understand. And what we're doing here this morning is sending out ripples of spirit that's adding to the larger ripples that are floating around the earth at this moment. And I think we add our positive, creative, sacred space to the world in a positive way. And just to be a part of that is, I can't ask for a better job in life than just to be a part. And so this is why I honor having these types of sharings with people, because for me it truly is creating sacred space. Now we've talked about briefly, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I just wanted to get that out. Lynn's looking at me with that eye. She's giving me the evil eye. She's going, oh, okay, there he goes again. He's off on another one of his rambles. But you talked about the dreaming a little bit of the grandmothers. Who are the grandmothers?
I don't know.
What a great answer.
I mean, I'm forever meeting people who have very firm ideas about who the grandmothers are, which I'm fascinated by.
Yeah.
This is what I do know. I would say that the grandmothers are the manifestation of the divine in my psyche. That doesn't mean they might not have a purely independent existence outside of me. They may very well have. But I simply don't know about that. It doesn't surprise me, given my history, the fact that I am a woman in my 50s. I first saw the grandmothers when I was in my 20s. But it doesn't surprise me that if I think about how spirit was going to speak to me, it didn't surprise me that one of the forms that would take would be this circle of old women.
Makes perfect sense. As we all age, and I'm fighting this for myself, I'm in my, God, how old am I? I'm in my mid-40s.
Okay.
And I had to think about that for a second. I've actually forgotten my birthday, so it's not a... but I'm finding that as I'm growing older, I don't look so much at what I know. I'm getting to a place now of realizing not only how much I don't know, but how much everything's kind of changed. Time has quickened, it seems.
Oh, yeah.
And what I thought what I would have, stood firmly on ground, feet planted, shouting at the sky, this is the way. Now I'm kind of like, well, I don't know. I find myself saying, I don't know a lot these days. Any similarities there?
Oh, yeah. I think it was Socrates, who said that a wise man knew how little he knew and knew how much he didn't know. I think that the older you get, the less clear-cut things become. It's a lovely and delusional state of youth to feel like there are right answers to things, and things are very clear. I miss that sometimes.
Yeah.
But, I think you have to make a decision at a certain point in your life whether or not you're going to kind of cling to pretending you don't know that things are not nearly as clear as you wish they were. And I think you're also more willing to say, I don't know, and to live with that, and to know that there are things that you may never know.
Yeah.
Particularly, I think, the why questions. I mean, I think when you're younger and bad things happen, whatever that might be, that are not in your control, what are other people's actions, natural, disasters, various things. And the question why is there. I often think of Viktor Frankl, who was a survivor of Auschwitz, and he said, don't ask, why is this happening to me? What is this supposed to mean? Ask, what meaning am I going to make of this? So you don't start attributing meaning to things. You're aware that you're the one telling the story, and you consciously tell the story that will give you meaning from the events of your life.
I like that, and that's a beautiful way of putting it. And it's also, coming from that perspective, it's so much easier to stay out of judgment.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because other people have every right to make their own meaning. And if that meaning is one of victimhood or whatever it might be, they have a right to do that.
Yeah.
That's their life. They have every right to do it. And you have no idea. It may look like a really bad story to you. You wonder, why would you choose that? But we don't know. We have such a tiny perspective. We don't know that a story that seems very self-destructive to us right now may lead to an enormous opening later. Yeah. We don't know.
Exactly. And see, that's the beauty of... Now, see, is this something that happens when one is coming into their 40s, or is this a natural, do you think?
Sadly, no. I mean, I don't think age... I think age gives you enough experience to have the opportunity to let go of certainty, but it doesn't necessarily give you the courage to do it. One of the teachers I used to work with, the medicine man, used to say that people in their 40s basically decide whether they're going to live or die. And most of them decide they're going to die. And by that, he didn't mean physically. They just start to wind down. They start to make their life smaller and smaller, because the prospect of really taking responsibility for even acknowledging how much you don't know becomes terrifying. And so for instance, around other people, I'm a big fan of the Jungian analyst James Hollis, who writes some wonderful books that are very clear. But he talks about, in your probably early 50s, you get your first opportunity to really wake up or really grow up. But to do that, you have to expand your capacity to tolerate anxiety, ambiguity, and ambivalence. Which doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun, and it's not. Yeah. But, so most of our lives, our strategies for dealing with people, for dealing with life, for the stories we tell ourselves, are anxiety management strategies. Are ways to try and reduce our own anxiety, our own ambivalence, and the ambiguity of life itself. And growing up is really about acknowledging that those three are there, and that if you want to live fully, you're going to need to increase your capacity to bear them when they pop up and not try and get rid of them. Yes. The other thing about that just occurred to me when you were talking about, other people's right to have their story. The paradox here is holding the knowledge that each person is another myself. That there's, in many ways, we have so many similarities in what we love, what we want for ourselves and our children. And the paradox is that each is wholly another, and allowing the other to truly be other, to understand the boundary of where I stop and you begin, so that I'm not stepping into your circle unconsciously on the basis of saying, well, we're all one. We're all one. We're all part of a wholeness. We're not, part of the human experience is we are differentiated. And my stepping into your circle and glossing it over with a New Age platitude of we're all one is still my stepping into your circle.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to get into that too. later on after the break, because it's interesting. The last maybe 3 or 4 elders conferences that I've gone to, and the last, the first or second one was in 2004, so a good 6 years. During these 6 years to the 3 or 4 that I've been to, one of the things that's been stressed over and over and over again is that it's time for those elders to start speaking their stories, not to hold so much in anymore, to start sharing them. And it's interesting about what you were just saying when one relates it to that. How I was kind of one of those people that was having a tough time, because the fellow I ran with, he got in trouble because he was even, teaching or sharing some of his teachings with white folk, right?
Yes.
And so I came from a place of, if you're there with a good heart and true spirit, color is irrelevant. And so that you just gave me a new insight on that. Thank you, because I never really looked at it like that before, about stepping on. I knew of protocol and all that kind of stuff, but the stepping on the stories. Now, is that the ego talking, or does that come from someplace else? Like, this is my story, and don't tread on it.
Well, it can be a kind of sort of self-importance. I mean, that's the flip side of allowing others their own story, is to be able to recognize that our stories are our stories, and sometimes they're serving us, and often they're no longer serving us.
Yeah.
And we need to revise, edit.
Yeah, see that.
Or we need to throw a story out entirely. The point is that we each have the right to do that for ourselves. We can't do that for each other. And so the thing about ego is that, on the one hand, ego can be a horrible pattern of again, strategies to lower that anxiety. On the other hand, to do the real work of seeing your story, consciously writing your story, letting go of it, whatever it is, you have to have a pretty strong ego, or you're not going to be able to function on a day-to-day basis as you're revising your story.
Yeah, see, and that I've often thought of. That's why I really like doing the show live, even though sometimes it presents problems with technology and such. But I like the live spirit of it, because you don't really, I don't really plan on questions and that kind of. I just kind of, do my research and then let it incubate overnight or a couple of days or whatever, and then let spirit evolve how it takes shape. Because I come from the place of, you be prepared. It's actually best to be over prepared, but you allow that space for spirit to, make form, make shape. So
and in part, your preparation is what lets you let go of it.
You're right. That's exactly right. Yeah. That's interesting how that works, because one would think it does the opposite, but it's not.
Well, I mean, unless you in your preparation, you get really wedded to this is the way it should go.
Yeah, no, I never do.
Of course, we can always do.
Yeah.
But I mean, I find when I do, public speaking, I'm always have an arc and things prepared, and I will often wander. In fact, some of the preparation allows me to wander a long way off, and then I may find myself out on a limb somewhere, and I glance back down at the cards I've heard and go, oh, right, so I can come back here.
Yeah, that's exactly.